Welcome into episode 188. Be sure you're following us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at @ByCASimmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. Christian, how are you?
Doing good. I am drinking coffee, which means this podcast should be electric, depending on how quickly this hits me. So it should be fun.
I feel like we're on a streak right now. I feel like we're on a streak of going off the rails each and every week. And maybe it's just because it's the off season. Maybe it's
Could
just
be.
like we can't stay focused on one particular thing because there's not a game at the end of the week to hone in on. So it's just like, let's just see where this goes. And there's a good chance that happens again. What?
Is this our 3-year anniversary week?
No, that's our 3-year anniversary is Monday. It's like a
Okay.
few days.
Okay. So next week's our 3-year. Okay. I just for a second, because I was about to say that maybe after 3 years we've just stopped caring. And then I was like, wait a minute. I think it's actually almost our 3-year anniversary.
Yeah,
So
after
that's exciting.
2 years and 51 weeks.
We decided that's enough. Well, actually, really 49 because we're 2 weeks removed from the podcast where we just got very philosophical and just sort of which actually I listened back to that podcast. It was a really solid conversation. I thought we touched on some interesting themes and topics that are affecting Night Nation currently. So maybe we should go off the rails more. It results in good conversation.
Maybe it really, I mean, that's what this podcast was intended to be and always, I think, has been, is like we try to keep it on track, but it's also just like you and I are just having a conversation about UCF.
It's
And if
this
it
this
goes
podcast is
somewhere,
essentially a structured conversation, is how I refer to it when we talk about what our strategy is for the podcast,
good.
because we definitely don't want to be too newsy. We also don't want to be so lighthearted that it makes no sense. We toe that line sometimes, but we're doing
Yeah.
okay.
So today we are going to get into some UCF coaching staff reshuffling.
Sure are.
But before we do that, we're going to talk men's basketball because I don't care if you guys don't want to hear about it. This is a Big 12 men's basketball program now and a Big 12 program in general. We're going to talk basketball. We have to, especially after last week, which was just, I don't know, one of the all-time bad timings for us as a podcast was recording on Wednesday at like, I think we finished recording at like 6:30, like not even an hour before UCF hosted number 3 Kansas. And I even said on the podcast, like, I'm not doing a game of the week. One, I wasn't going to do game of the week because like I wasn't going to do a game that by the time people had heard the podcast, it will have already happened. But also things had not gone well in the opener. So I was like, all right, we'll just see until they prove me wrong, until they prove they deserve a game of the week. I'm not doing a game of the week. And we had to get questions in anyway. And then that night they went out and they beat number 3 Kansas in their Big 12 home opener, which one of the like, I don't know. There's hasn't been that many sporting events, I don't feel like, recently where I've been standing up and pacing around my apartment or wherever I'm watching the game. And I was doing that and I was screaming and I wanted it to happen so badly. I was waiting for it to go off the rails and it didn't. They beat Kansas. The palm fronds were out in full effect. That's a thing now. Since the last podcast, that's a thing. And the court was stormed. It was just a great moment because you not everybody gets those kind of moments, and UCF got one and had one in their first ever Big 12 home game.
Yeah, it's one of those things which, like you said, elite timing on our part to make fun of the basketball team multiple times over the course of that podcast, and then immediately after we finished recording, they notched their biggest win in program history. That was fantastic. And that's kind of the point I was making after that. But just full disclosure, we record on Wednesdays, and the Big 12 does this very annoying thing where most of its teams play on Wednesdays. So we're once again missing a game here. UCF will have played at Texas by the time you're listening to this. We obviously don't know how that game's going to go, but I'm also expecting them to lose and it to not be particularly close. So if it's anything better than that, great. Doesn't really change my opinion on what's going on, but my
Now they're
immediate
gonna win.
reaction,
You said
they are
that.
going to win, which great. Like I'm looking forward to
Yeah.
watching it after this and hopefully being able to watch more than, the first 10 minutes and it still be interesting. But it's just, everyone knows about the state of this basketball program. Everyone knows that the competitive disadvantages that it's at. I think that pretty much everyone went into the season saying, hey, if they can win like 11 or 12 games total, that would be better than expected for a lot of the fan base. So for their first ever Big 12 home game, for them to beat not only the number 3 team in the country, but Kansas, who's like the biggest, most synonymous brand outside of maybe except like Duke and North Carolina and all of college basketball and major brand, the brand of the conference. I just, whatever happens the rest of the season or the rest of UCF's time in the Big 12 conference as a basketball team, I love that we have that moment forever. It was just one of those things where you're watching it happen on TV, or if you were lucky enough to be in the arena and you're just like, this is so special.
It was one of those things where I was like, man, I wish I still lived in Orlando because I would have been there and it would
This
have
is your
been
fault. I literally texted you like the
okay,
day
but
or
here's
so
the
before
thing.
the game, and I was like, I wish you never moved because I want to go to this game.
If if I hadn't moved, if I still I just I'm a firm believer in this. I still lived there. If I was just in town for that game, they would have lost if I was there. I'm not saying like a bad. I'm not usually a jinx or anything, but I'm saying like I had to work out that way. I had to be walking circles around my apartment for them to win that game. And the cool thing about that is they don't play Kansas again this year unless they play
Nope.
them in the Big 12 tournament. So it's like that was their game against Kansas this year, and they beat them.
It is
And
amazing that
Kansas
pending Big 12.
unchanged. Kansas went number
Yeah.
3 to number 3.
Not only,
UCF just,
they went number 3 to number 3 because they followed up their game against UCF where they lost, and the national media narrative became, wow, Kansas is not good this year and clearly has issues. They beat a top 10 Oklahoma team, and then they just destroyed, I think it was Oklahoma State who they played after that. So they're fine. It was just a special night for UCF. And
yeah.
like I said, I'm trying to keep it because unlike the football team, there are not necessarily wider aspirations available to the basketball team. So I'm not trying to turn this into, wow, who knows what they can achieve now. I'm just taking it as, wow, what a great single game that does not impact anything. And to UCF's credit, they then hosted BYU a few days later, who's the number 18 team in the country. And the arena was once again insane. I can't overstate what a ridiculous surprise it has been that AdFi is like one of the better environments in the Big 12 this year somehow. And they came close to winning. They lost by 5, and it was a tight game the whole way. UCF men's basketball has never really been able to compete with top 25 teams. And they beat the number 3 team and almost beat the number 18 team in a 4-day span.
It's ridiculous. Like, it kind of speaks to the Big 12 just as a basketball conference that UCF in 1 week was like, this is like the kind of atmosphere we want to have at our arena, and they just did it. And it's like, UCF's one of the bottom tier teams in the conference, and they have this environment. Like,
first off,
they just
one
beat
of the
Kansas.
bottom tier teams. They are the bottom tier team in the
conference.
conference.
But I mean, this year, like Oklahoma
and
State and West Virginia aren't very good this year. So I was saying, like, in terms of that, because
right. But those are still two programs that historically care a lot about basketball and have strong fan bases. UCF historically doesn't have fans in the arena. So and there were still plenty of I asked for estimates from different people who were at the Kansas game. I heard 70-30 and 80-20 as the split for UCF fans, which I thought it would be the reverse. So I'm thrilled with that. The palm frond thing is awesome. If you don't know what we're talking about, the student section was full of palm fronds for the Kansas game that they were waving at the Kansas players. And I guess the story behind that, apparently, according to Jimmy Skiles, was we just had that really weird, bad storm the night before that game. Did you get that in Tampa?
Yeah, there was some
like
bad
a 20-minute
weather.
hurricane.
We had a tornado. Which one's worse, a warning or a watch?
Warning. That means there is
warning. We had a tornado warning, and I had to I have a big sliding glass door here in my apartment, so I was like, all right, I got to go into the hallway or into the bathroom, and just sat in the bathroom for like 15-20 minutes with my laptop.
I would have gone to the window. I would have gone to the window to watch for the tornado.
What's funny is like I went in there, and then no one cares about this, but I went in there, and then I was like, well, might as well just go get my work, like my laptop, so I can just continue to do some work while I'm in here. And as I walk out to get my laptop, I look out the window, and it's like gray and like rainy outside, but there's like no wind. So I was like, this is the worst tornado watch ever. But apparently it was it was like close to me. Apparently, like it was around here there was damage.
I hope that I'm not. If there are any meteorology folks listening, please correct us on social media. But I think that when there is a tornado, there typically isn't wind because all the wind is in the tornado. So like it's very still around where the tornado
see, I wouldn't know that because I'm not smart.
Neither am I. It's probably wrong. Some meteorologist is listening to this just smashing their head against the table right now. Like this idiot just said there's no wind when there's a tornado, but I swear that's a thing because it's like all the wind's in the funnel or something. I don't know.
It makes sense, I think. But so back to the whole palm frond thing. I don't know if I remember if I read it or not, if I just forgot, but did Jimmy Skiles say, was it a thing where like students just picked them up on their way in?
So I don't know for sure because like you never know, but apparently yes, like it was just all because there's all those palm trees lining the front of AdFi and there were branches everywhere and students just picked them up. What makes it so crazy is that UCF men's basketball and women's basketball in particular have leaned into the palm frond thing in advance. Yeah. The paint of the court now has palm fronds. The paneling on their uniforms has palm fronds. So for that to just happen is insane.
I didn't put that together until Saturday's game. I was wait a minute. Wait a minute. And I mean, I knew that was the case. And then I was like watching the game against BYU and I was like, oh yeah, look at the palm. I was like, that's a funny coincidence. But yeah, because then I saw Saturday, I think it was Danny Medina posted the picture of the guy who had just brought a truck full of them and was just like handing them out to the students on the way in the entrance. So I don't know. Love that that's a thing now. Love that like UCF basketball in the span of a few days was just like, here is one of our new things for the student section.
Now,
it was just a natural.
That's
where it becomes like when it's a natural thing like that, that's when those traditions work. It's not
it's better. It's better when the AD just says, this is my favorite song and you're going to listen to it every damn football game, whether you like it or not. Here's my hope though, is that I'll go there, is that this week, UCF, you'll already know the result of this game if you're listening to this podcast. UCF plays at Texas tonight. They're not ranked, but they have been ranked for a lot of the season. They're very good. Then they play at number 5 Houston, who currently has the same record in the Big 12 as UCF, which is definitely not a thing I had on my bingo card. But either way, I think it is safe to say that both those games are likely going to be losses. They're likely not going to be particularly close games. I think UCF basketball is clearly better this year than we anticipated. And since they beat Kansas, we have to take every game as a game they can possibly win. But playing at home, which shockingly is a very energetic, loud, insane environment, and going on the road to these really good teams is a different story. I expect UCF will lose both those games. I think that's fine. But then on Tuesday of next week, they play West Virginia at home, who might be the most beatable home. It absolutely is the most winnable home game they have left. I'm going to be sad if coming off the 3 straight losses, the atmosphere is back to sucking. Like, I'm really hopeful for that Tuesday we get that same rowdy atmosphere. I'm going to try to go to the game, hopefully. I hope we get a fun, cool atmosphere for that one, too. And I hope this sort of becomes a thing and not just we were really excited for exactly 1 week because the basketball team was better than we thought they'd be.
I found myself feeling the same way where I was like, I hope it's just like people saw how fun it could be. And I think student attendance typically has been good for basketball over the years.
Absolutely. I don't want to like come across as the students have historically, it's the rest of the arena that's historically been dead. The students typically show up pretty well to basketball.
Yeah. So, and I think part of it is just like it's the Big 12. Like this, people look at this and they're like, this is quote unquote real basketball. So it's like people weren't showing up for games against, whoever, insert opponent here. But people see these big brands coming in. They're like, oh, like UCF's playing against whoever. I mean, even seeing West Virginia, or like they'll have Texas Tech later this year. Like that kind of stuff.
Do you want to hear the rest of their home slate?
Yeah, I mean, I have it up, but you can go ahead and read it off for everyone listening.
Yeah, I really meant everyone, but thank you. So it is just crazy. It's insane. What's crazy about the Big 12 for men's basketball is it's better in basketball than the SEC is in football. Like this conference is just ridiculous. It's just so far ahead of everyone else, and that's terrifying for a program like UCF that does not invest in or particularly care about basketball. But anyway, their home slate the rest of the year is West Virginia, number 9 Baylor, number 15 Oklahoma, Cincinnati, number 25 Texas Tech, number 24 Iowa State, number 5 Houston. Like they're just playing ranked teams like the rest of the way. And the 2 teams they are playing the rest of the way that are ranked are West Virginia, who is having a bad year, and Cincinnati, who might be ranked next week because they just knocked off number 19 TCU at home last night. So it's just, and that might be why the environment gets better, because even when your basketball team isn't very good, like when your basketball team isn't very good, and they're playing Tulsa or whoever, or Tulane. I don't know why I always go for the T schools. We always talk about those for the AAC. I always go Temple, Tulane, Tulsa. I don't know why. But instead it's top 10 teams, top 15 teams in these big brands. I think it's easier to have that amped up excitement even when your team isn't good, because you're walking in like, oh man, this could be the night we take down the Green Wave. Instead it's like, hey, we could beat the number 9 team and I want to be here for it. So it's just,
what's funny is, so this game happened, the Kansas game happened on Wednesday. What was it? Wednesday the 10th. The previous week, Thursday the 4th, I took my mom to the USF basketball game. It was a part of her birthday present back in November, and it was USF and Temple. I mean, I don't know, decent atmosphere, but it was like what I had come to like know in the AAC, and I was like, and I was thinking even at the time I told you, I was like, it's weird that like this used to be like normally like for years now this would have been a game that like impacted UCF's conference, and that was just kind of like a completely different thing.
Was it a good atmosphere?
And I mean, it wasn't terrible. Like the people that were there were into it. It wasn't like packed or anything, but like people that were there were into it. But like then the next week, UCF's arena is packed against the number 3 team, and I'm like, this really is like a stark difference in terms of basketball conference. I mean, we knew that, but just seeing that from week to week, I don't know. I've been looking at the schedule and trying to figure out if I can make it work with my schedule. I want to get to at least 1 game before the end of the year, but it's difficult with the way things have worked out.
Yeah, I'd like you to get to at least 1 game too, because as far as people who care about UCF basketball, it's either you or my dad, and my dad does not like college basketball. So one of you is going to have to, so I don't have to go to a game alone. One of you is going to have to decide that you're interested in doing that. But
I'm going to have to figure it out. It's difficult because soon I'm going to Mobile for the Senior Bowl again, and that's a whole week, and then. Like that's the thing. Like this weekend, I could have come this weekend, but then they're on the road. Like it's every weekend that's like perfect for me. They're on the road, so I'm gonna have to make something work and make something inconvenient for myself to go. But I would still like to.
I also have to say, you mentioned how you for your mom's birthday you went to the USF game. Have we ever said on the podcast before that your parents are USF grads? Has that ever come up?
We did.
Probably.
I think it has. I think it has.
Well, to our newer listeners, look at what Bailey had to overcome to get to where he is now.
Other things, so we're not going to spend the entire podcast on basketball. We have a couple more things. We have one more topic, and then we said we're going to answer a few of your questions from Twitter. about basketball. But then nothing that was on, I don't think either of our radars. All of a sudden last week, was it maybe Friday? UCF landed Mikey Williams, who
Yep.
I didn't know who Mikey Williams was before this, but apparently he's a huge deal. Did you know who he
Yeah.
was? Oh, I mean,
Yes.
I didn't know. I had no clue. I might have heard his name once, but um, a big deal for multiple reasons. One, like some good, some pretty bad.
So I knew who
Um,
he was for the bad reason. I didn't know that
yeah,
he was the big social media star and all that.
yeah.
Mikey Williams has millions of followers on Instagram and TikTok, and he has something like almost 4 million followers on Instagram, and is a
Well,
social media icon.
I was
So
reading
yeah,
something that said like he was one of the like early stars of the NIL era, but like he wasn't even in college yet. Like it was just
yeah, he was making money
crazy.
though because as you can see from the police report, he was living in a $1.2 million home before ever going to college, which is something.
Yeah. So yeah, you mentioned a police report. So there's obviously a reason why this mega social media star ended up at UCF with
And
UCF
incredibly
basketball.
good player to be clear,
Yeah.
borderline top
Yeah.
50 player in the 2024 class.
You
2023,
know more of the not, I don't know if you know the details, but you know more of what happened than I do. I just know there were legal troubles involving guns. And so I
Yes.
don't yeah, that I don't think I can touch it with more than that without getting myself into potential trouble because I don't know what happened.
So I always feel weird talking about like I hate when we have to talk about legal stuff like this on the podcast because I'm always afraid of like what you can and cannot say. But as far as what's out there and has been written by other publications, so this is not our talking or whatever, but just what was said was that there was an incident at his house where people in a Tesla came up to his house and he was accused of not wanting them there or something like that, and with a gun fired at the car as it drove away, which, you know, not the
That's worse
best,
than what I
not the
even heard. Like
best
I didn't even read
thing.
that part of the story. That makes it even worse. But
Yeah, I
okay, go
hope that's
ahead.
accurate. And obviously that was a very serious, situation and charge and all that. And I guess as time has gone on, the charge has been lessened. And the last thing I read is that if he agrees to do community service and a gun management class, it sounds like this all kind of goes away. But
Yeah.
obviously still a situation where he had signed with Memphis and Memphis had not allowed him to be around the program, understandably, given the severity of the situation. And obviously a player of that caliber would not be coming to UCF under normal circumstances, but this is one of those situations where given that background, he doesn't really have either the NIL or just the regular options available to him elsewhere. And it's a risk for UCF because you hope that that is a one-time incident. You hope that's not indicative of a larger problem. But at the end of the day, that Kansas win was great. Hasn't changed the NIL reality for UCF even a little bit. They still are not even close to being able to compete as a basketball program with their other conference peers. I'm really not speaking out of turn without getting into like specific numbers when I say that you can take the Kingdom's entire NIL budget for all sports, and that is the equivalent of what some Big 12 teams have spent on like two basketball players. So UCF's just not in a position to do anything NIL wise in basketball to get competitive. So you have to do things like this, take shots on players take shots, probably a bad way to phrase that other schools
Uh
probably would have passed on, but you have the opportunity to land because of sort of an off court situation. So that's what UCF did. I'm
yeah.
okay with it, to be honest, because if you want them to land good players, this is kind of the only way they can do it right now.
And the weird thing about this was I think originally it seemed to be a possibility that he would be eligible immediately. And now that's less certain. We're not sure if he'll
I'm
be
not even sure if he's
eligible.
enrolled because he was at the last
Yeah.
basketball game and he was not with the team in any capacity. He was just in the stands like a fan. And UCF
Yeah.
has they've gotten bid on this in past years. They have weird enrollment requirements. Like I think they have an earlier spring deadline enrollment date than other schools. So it gets a little messed up. So I'm not totally sure what his status is as far as enrollment.
Yeah, and so if he's not enrolled, obviously he cannot play the rest of this season. And then you get into like I know people have talked about like will he ever even play for UCF or will, once things kind of get cleared up, will any other teams come back in for him, before next season and all of that stuff kind of is in the future. And sure, I guess there's a possibility that he doesn't end up playing for UCF, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what changes between like what just happened, like him committing to UCF and then I don't know if anyone will suddenly be like, "Oh yeah, like we're back in." I don't think anything can change from here. I mean, there could be. I'm sure there could be some teams come back in, but if
Right.
this was like one of his only options right now, and I believe you said there was like a relationship or something there that existed, is why he was on UCF's radar. UCF was on his radar. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just want to say all that just to say may or may not even end up suiting up for UCF, but still, I mean, it's a pretty big get if he does and if everything works out the way UCF obviously hopes it will. I know I saw a lot of people saying like if it is one of those things where he does stick around, like Johnny Dawkins would seem to be a good, a good person to have being his coach. Like it just seems like
Yeah.
a solid relationship there.
Yeah, I think so. So I'm just going to read this straight from AP because like I said, I feel weird talking about like legal type stuff, so I don't want to like misstate anything. So the deal was that Mikey Williams was accused of shooting at a car with 6 people in it at his $1.2 million home in San Diego County. So that's the deal. No one actually saw him fire the gun, but I guess that, I don't know. I don't know. No one saw
I
him
don't know.
fire a gun or whatever, but he reached a plea deal that resulted in no jail time and the community service and stuff I talked about. So I think I covered it pretty well initially.
Yeah, no, I think
I
you
think
did.
we're good.
Yeah.
This is a sports podcast, guys. I don't know. It's like we get out of sports. I don't know what I'm doing
We're
anymore.
talking about weather, we're talking about legal cases.
We literally in the span of 10 minutes went from like what does wind do during a tornado to gun charges. Like
Yeah.
our podcast has a lot of range, but yeah, I mean for everything you just said, I think that, and maybe I'm way off, but I feel like the best case scenario for UCF here is he plays for UCF next year and is very, very good, and that lets them win some games they shouldn't, maybe even be a solid team. And then he probably transfers to a blue blood after he's proven for a year that there's not going to be any repeat incidences. But I think
Yeah.
that's fine. It's this is a player they never would have gotten under normal circumstances. And the thing you have to understand, because I know that a lot of our listeners and a lot of the UCF fan base in general are more well versed in football than basketball. That's because of UCF's culture. It's also because of Central Florida culture. College basketball isn't really big in Florida. We're definitely a football state through and through. Even the Heat and the Magic suffer from that to an extent, that we're just not a super heavy basketball state. But especially in college, when you have a football team, right? You have 11 starters on offense, 11 starters on defense. There's other guys who rotate in. You need like 25 plus good players to have a genuinely good team. In college basketball, if you get one who is really, really good, that can completely change your team because he's just one of five out there at any given time. If he's transcendent enough, he can tell the rest of your team, just get out of the way and I'll go score the points. So for UCF, it is worth the risk, hopefully, to bring in a player of this caliber because if he does pan out, it can really change next season. So I'm okay with the risk. It could end very badly, but I'm okay with it for now.
My only counter is they just had Taylor Hendricks, a first round pick in the NBA draft, and they were
I don't want
still
to like
kind of average. So
okay, here's the thing. Taylor Hendricks is a really, really good player, and he's obviously successful in the NBA. He wasn't that type of player, like the guy who you just give him the ball and wave everyone off, and he's going to put up a billion points. Like that wasn't what got him to the NBA. So it's like he wasn't
yeah,
like he wasn't like a pure scorer. So I know that people always say that, but it's like it's not that cut and dry or black and white. And also, I would argue that they had a pretty awful team last year, and Taylor Hendricks dragged them to the NIT, including a win over Florida. So.
um, yeah. So we'll get through these. We picked 4 listener questions to get through here real quick before we talk about the UCF football coaching changes. We'll start with Charles Zollers. He says, could any of the tertiary sports such as baseball, softball, volleyball, etc., ever become the second biggest sport on campus, especially if UCF men's basketball is in the cellar for years? What do you think? Like, I don't know. I have a weird take on this where it's like, so some people personally, like it just depends on what sports you enjoy. But men's college basketball, I think, will always be number 2 nationally. So in some state, like in some cases, no, I don't think anything ever rises above it just because of what it is nationally. But I would argue that in terms of UCF fan interest, I almost feel like the interest in softball in recent years has surpassed men's basketball
So
just
I
because
was
of how
about I
good
was
they've been.
about to say that I think at UCF there's a clear one and it's softball. And I think there were both internal and external factors pushing that. Externally, college softball is becoming very popular. It's the new
Yeah.
rising sport in America. It's on national TV a lot more often than it used to be. The postseason is at the point where it's getting millions of viewers. I mean, college softball last offseason was on at the same time as the NHL, and it was outperforming the NHL every night, which is just kind of crazy when you look at it. And I know the NHL is the lowest of the big 4 sports in America, but that's still crazy. And so I think externally, it's that softball is getting a lot more popular. And internally, it's that UCF is really freaking good at softball and has just moved into a very good softball league and is probably going to continue to be very good. They sell out their stadium to the point that everyone knows it needs to expand. They have a
Yeah.
really solid team. They already have a lot of fan support. And just with how good UCF is and the growing interest nationally in that sport, it feels like it would not surprise me if on a year in, year out basis, softball could eventually, I'm not predicting it, but if I had to pick one, surpass UCF men's basketball and fan support. Now, the caveat being, if UCF basketball was ever good for 1 year, they would skyrocket past softball's interest. Like it's one of those things where as long as UCF basketball stays bad, sure, but one good year would always be way more fan interest both internally and externally than you would ever get for softball.
And that's what I was getting at with the whole like nationally men's college basketball is just on that level where I mean everybody like March Madness like that takes over the country.
Yeah.
So it'd be because of that, like yeah, I think it's at most schools as probably number two or if not number one at like some of the big blue bloods. But yeah, no, I mean I think I don't know that any of the other ones could, and everyone has going to have their own like personal rankings like of which ones. Like I would say I pay more attention to probably softball and baseball than men's basketball typically in a typical year. Um, but I'm also not like I'm not saying that I'm the norm. It's just that's my personal thing. And even volleyball, like I probably you and I probably watch more UCF volleyball than most people do. So
Yeah. Kind of watch a lot
yeah,
more
I
of those.
mean,
So I've been doing a thing the last week or so on Twitter where I've been asking UCF fans. I've been posting all these Twitter polls asking them what their interest level is in all the different UCF sports. I'm working my way through them. I've only done 4 so far, but I give you 4 levels. Level 1 is you're a diehard who knows all the players and watches most games. Level 2 is you care and will watch some games, but you aren't overly invested. Level 3 is you mostly just see scores on Twitter. Level 4 is you don't care at all. And I've been posting those. And softball actually like, and again, this is a Twitter poll. So it's
oh, I
not
missed your
scientific.
softball one.
Yeah, I put softball. More people care about softball than baseball, which I guess isn't surprising really because
That
of how
doesn't
good
surprise me at
softball's
all.
been. But I don't know. I think UCF softball really is for the last few years now has probably been the second most popular sport on campus most of the time. What's
Probably.
unfortunate is that there's also UCF women's basketball, which has just completely gone in the gutter since Abe left. And the unfortunate thing about women's basketball, and I think this is the case at a lot of schools, is it's one of those things where when they're good, the fan base is very interested, and when they're bad, no one's even mad. It's just like they don't exist. Like I don't think any UCF fans are upset that women's basketball is bad. They just don't care, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I think it's yeah. I was thinking about that too when I was thinking about like just where would I rank each UCF sport? And I was like, well, a few years ago when Abe was here and like it was actually like it was fun to follow them because they were a winning team and they were like having these big games against, USF and before that UConn. Like they were further up there. But like lately it's
Yeah,
just like hard it's hard to get invested when like week or like night in, night out they're losing by
they're
20
just getting
plus. Like
stomped over and over again. Yeah.
yeah. With I don't know like how much hope there is like that things will get better anytime soon. So yeah, I mean that's difficult, but
That's worth it. I mean, I don't know how much our listeners care, but are we? I mean, next year is going to be a conversation, right? With Messer, not obviously this offseason, but if they're really bad again next year, it's going to be year 3 and really nothing's happened. What's unfortunate is, unlike other sports, it's not easy to find out how a women's basketball team is doing in recruiting. There's just not the media presence there or the online presence. So because I thought Messer was a great hire, and the whole plan was they're going to recruit like crazy, and I don't know if they're doing that. It's hard to get a read on it. All I know is that they're very bad, but it's
you should see some sort of progress next year. Like
and
anything
that's the thing.
tangible.
Yeah. They don't need
It
to go
doesn't
win
have
the
to be
Big
like
12. They just need to
yeah,
be respectable. But I
yeah.
also
All right.
worry that now we're down the rabbit hole. I also worry that Abe just set a standard that's just not. I mean, Abe is one of the best college women's basketball coaches out there, and I maybe that's just not sustainable what they were doing with her.
Yeah, I don't know. It's difficult, especially like when you're in the new conference. Like
Yeah,
this is a better conference
much
too.
better conference.
So it's difficult to kind of get back to that level when you're already facing like Abe left and took the entire team with her or others left. And so you had bare bones here and you were
Yeah, they
moving into the
started
Big
over.
12. So it's difficult. All right, let's get through the rest of these questions so we can get on to football, which I know a lot of people are probably like, just talk about football.
You guys can.
This is
I'll put a timestamp in the what's the word I'm looking for? The description of the
I don't
episode. So if people are
yeah,
really
I
that
guess.
committed, they can just skip to football.
I guess. I want you guys to care about other things too, though. Open your minds. This is from Matt. Matt says, one, will the Kansas win and close loss to BYU be enough for fans to start donating to basketball in the kingdom specifically for basketball? If no, then what will it take? And then it says, two, are the UCF men's basketball uniforms bland or are all basketball uniforms boring in general?
We'll get into the second
Start
one in a minute, but
yeah.
the first one will the Kansas win and the BYU loss be enough for fans to donate to the Kingdom for basketball? No, of course not. Are you kidding me? Most of the
I
fan base
mean, the
moved on
night of
already.
they were smart to run like a little campaign where it's like
Yeah,
get a game used basketball from this win if you just make a one-time donation. So like maybe little things like that where they have a big win, they're just like, all right, yeah, you happy? Like, donate. But I don't think it's like I don't think that one win is going to be like
no.
stirring anything up like long term. So
I also could be
yeah, and then
wrong,
as
but
far as what will it take,
I don't
I
believe the
don't think
Kingdom offers you that option in the first place. I don't think that you can donate specifically to basketball. I think that you just donate.
yeah. So I'm curious. Yeah, I'm curious about that then, because then they were like when they were like donate, make a one-time donation. to win this basketball, is that just going to it's just going to a general
I assume so.
kingdom fund? Are they just going to go turn around and use that for football anyway?
Probably. I was literally going to make the
So,
joke that everyone's going to get all amped up for basketball and donate all this money, and then that's going to buy us a really nice wide receiver. Like, I just think that that's. I mean, look, it's just at the end of the day, and I've said it a billion times on this podcast. I know what the deal is. The vast majority of the kingdom needs to go to football, and I personally don't want them to divert any of it to basketball yet. They're barely competing in football. They need that money. If the kingdom gets to a certain point where they're thriving in football, I mean, I don't know. I feel like the fan base kind of has to tell the administration what they want at that point, because I don't buy that any of you are willing to sacrifice any football success for any basketball success. I think that's fair to say. And
that's
I
well,
go
no, you've
ahead.
already run that poll, haven't you? I feel like
Yeah,
you
I ran it
have,
a long
haven't
time
you? Yeah.
ago. I
Okay,
ran it
I feel
like
like
I
you've been
forget
saying
how exactly I phrased it. I was like, would you take like even like 10%? Oh, I ran a poll that said, would you rather give like $5 million or something like that to basketball or use that to build the lazy river? And like it was like I think like 40% of people were like build the lazy river.
we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
And then this uniform question, do you want to talk about it now? Or you want to address it with our fourth question?
I can address it now really quickly. I
Okay,
don't
go
think
ahead.
UCF men's basketball's uniforms are bland at all. If you want to see some bland UCF men's basketball uniforms, look at what they wore for the last decade before this. The uniforms that they wore for the first, like for the tail end of the Donnie Jones era and most of the Dawkins era until last year, were the worst uniforms on UCF's campus, and there wasn't even like a close second. They literally just looked like a cheap $30 UCF tank top you would buy at like the bookstore. It was just straight black, no patterning or design of any kind, slap the UCF logo on the chest, white number. Like they were the worst uniforms imaginable. And the ones that they redesigned 2 years ago, or I guess a year ago now, because this is year two of them, they're awesome now. They're very clean. They're very straightforward, but that's part of that's just sort of how basketball uniforms are. To answer his second part, is it's not like football where you have all these different elements to play with and different things to filter in and out. I mean, you
And
always,
you don't have a helmet to do a decal with or anything. It's like that a helmet
yeah.
adds a
I mean,
whole
think
different
about
element to
a football uniform and all the components involved. You have a helmet, you have a decal, you have a face mask, you have a jersey that has sleeve trim and numbers and number trim
the
and
neck
shoulder
trim and all that.
design, and then you have pants and pants
Yeah.
design, and all of those three things can be different colors. Basketball teams very occasionally will try to like match different colors, like white top and like I don't know, blue bottom or something. Always looks horrific. So it's just that's kind of how basketball uniforms are, but I love these new ones, man. I especially love the road one or I guess the home ones. Okay, really quick tangent. Like 5 years ago now, the NBA switched that now the home teams wear colors and the away teams wear white, even though that's never how it has ever worked in basketball. And it still confuses me because college still wears white at home. So I just get messed up. But
Yeah.
the white uniforms in particular, I love. I love the palm frond patterns they have down the side. They're just very, very sharp and very icy. And no, I think they have really solid. The best uniforms they've ever had is what they're wearing right
Yeah.
now.
And the black ones I would love just as much if you and I have talked about this in the past, is like if it just said Knights across the chest like the home one does. I just don't think like
For our
there,
YouTube
oh, there you go.
people,
Those are beautiful, yeah.
yeah. So this showed up on Dick's Sporting Goods a while ago. If you're in the audio version of the podcast, is that they're exactly like if you've seen UCF's home uniforms they wear right now. They're exactly like that, except instead of the UCF logo on the chest, they have the script Knights in gold, and the side paneling is all gold. It doesn't transition from gold to white. And I Dick's is selling them, but they've never been worn. So hopefully we'll
Yeah.
see that at some point.
I hope so. Next question. This has turned into like just a full basketball podcast. Cass City J asks, over or under 5 more wins for the team this year? What did you say?
I think under, man. I think under.
I was trying to be as optimistic as possible, and even then I still only got to a push,
Yeah.
which is just 5 more wins. Which, listen to this. If they win 5 more games, I think I did the math right. They'd be 15 and 15.
Yeah. They would finish
And
15 and 15.
they'd be 7 and 12 in Big 12 play.
That would be like,
They'd go to the NIT.
well, how would they be 7 and 12? They've only won one Big 12 game.
They're 1 and 2. So wait, what did I say?
You
Oh,
said 7
sorry,
and 12.
6. So they'd be 6 and 12.
Which is still like that would be
They'd
like
probably go to the NIT.
give Dawkins an extension level performance. Like that would be incredible. I mean, they play West Virginia twice and Oklahoma State once. Those are your easiest wins. I think they will win one of those. Maybe they win two. They play Cincinnati twice, but Cincinnati's pretty good, but that might be their best shot. Another one. I don't know. And then other than that, you just have to hope for upsets because everyone else
Here's
is
what
ranked.
here's what I outlined. I outlined a home win over West Virginia. I'm not going to be bold enough yet, and even though West Virginia's having a down year, I don't want to say they're going to
Right.
sweep that. Home win against West Virginia. Hopefully, I said a home win against Cincy. I know Cincy's better, but I don't know. We'll see. A win at Oklahoma State, and then an upset of Iowa State at home. Then
Okay.
you just have to win one more.
Yeah. We'll see.
It's
Watch them
very
not
optimistic,
win
but
another game. Like we're all having this podcast, they just literally don't win another one the rest of the year. That
I,
would I like I said, I know they're going to lose to Texas and
there might be
Houston
tears.
presumably, and just don't get too upset about that. But I think they'll snag like I feel like 3 or 4 more feels realistic. They
I
just
had
need
a
to space
slight.
them out enough to keep people interested.
I mean, I based on absolutely nothing, I had a slight inkling of a feeling that they might beat Texas, but I don't know.
All I will say about Houston is they have beaten Houston before while not having a good team. Like that's
It's
happened
true.
multiple times in the past. So I mean, nothing's impossible, but I just, I don't know, to expect it is a little crazy. I think that honestly, if you're talking about just UCF basketball's long-term ceiling in this league, I truly think it's, unless something changes investment wise and NIL wise, hopefully make the tournament maybe once every 4 or 5 years when things go your way. And because listen, and in this conference, it's like go like 17-13 or 16-14 even in some years, and
Yeah.
you'll probably make it. And then once you're in there, who knows? You've been playing the best teams in the country all year. It might feel easy for the first couple rounds. You can make a run. I think if they can just at least regularly like get to February where fans can still dream about the tournament, I think that'll be success for the time being until something changes investment wise.
This is something this before even the Big 12 move, I think, was JP Gilbert's whole thing was just enjoy UCF men's basketball for the vibes. Just
Yeah.
have fun with it. And if they lose, don't get too down. Just enjoy it for what it is. And it almost feels like, yeah,
The
like,
unfortunate part is their games are so stressful for some reason. I don't know
yeah.
why that is. Like every game they play, even back when they were good in 2019, they're just always really freaking stressful. So it's hard, but you do what you can.
Um, Last question. I don't actually have the specific wording because I had to clarify. This comes from Therese, friend of the podcast.
And your
Wants to
girlfriend.
know, yes, and my girlfriend,
Okay.
wants to know. Well, that was your line. We talked about this.
Okay.
um, she wants to know our rankings of the top 5 basketball uniforms in the Big 12. I don't know. I had a hard time with this. I
I realized
scrambled.
I'm
She
not
gave me
watching enough
basically
to know.
she gave me more work to do today, which I didn't need. I was a very stressful day for me, and then like 5 minutes before the podcast, I'm scrambling to figure out my 5 favorite Big 12 uniforms. Number 5, I have TCU. Are we gonna
TCU
go? Oh,
was
you want me to go all the way?
we got to talk about a whole other thing after this. So I think we should like
Yeah.
TCU I had number 3.
Okay. Number 4, I had Oklahoma State.
I had Oklahoma State at
Um,
number 5.
Number 3, I had Oklahoma.
I did not have Oklahoma on here.
I just slapped them on there.
Okay.
Number 2, I had Texas.
I had Texas Tech at number 2 and didn't have Texas
Oh.
anywhere.
And then I had number 1, I had Kansas State.
Kansas State's basketball uniforms are awesome, man. Obviously,
They're
my number
so
one. Their lavender uniforms that they wear are freaking awesome. They also have the script Wildcats uniform. Their basketball uniforms are insane.
They have multiple uniform options that are better than anything else in the Big 12.
Yes,
So,
like 3 different uniforms. They have the black with the script Wildcats too. Why
yeah,
are they not bringing this passion to football? Like their football uniforms are fine, but they wear 2 combos. They just switch out the
yeah.
jersey. Whether they're like, I don't know
Because they
what
don't have
happened
to for
where
football because it's so classic that
I know.
it's a good look. I think we did our uniform rankings. I had them up high
But
because I just like the purple and silver.
how many college athletic programs do that where one sport is literally as classic old school as you can get, and then another sport for that same school is doing like a bunch of options? I feel like that is not a
Especially when
very
it's like
common thing.
football and basketball. Like you would think that would be
Yeah.
like swapped, but yeah. The only other thing I'd say like Texas has some kind of cool ones. I don't even know if they wear them anymore. Texas has a script one that I liked that I saw, and then TCU's I would have put higher because I think it's a cool design down the side, but I still haven't decided how I feel about them with wearing purple and red. Like I don't know how that
Well, it's the
I
whole
don't know how I feel about
because the
that.
horned frog shoots blood
Oh
from
no,
its eyes.
I know what it's from. I can't tell if I like the way it looks. I
I
don't
just
know.
want to shout out
But
Iowa State really quickly, and I'll show the photo in our very low res way, is because the down the side of their uniform is a little cyclone, which I think is cool. It's like
oh
stripes,
yeah.
red and yellow, and it looks very cool. It's a very abstract cyclone.
I would have put BYU on here, but I didn't like that on BYU's pants. They had a basketball like on the bottom of the pants with their
You know
logo in
what?
it.
Forgot to look at BYU's. Forgot that's a team in this
Just
conference,
you see
even
a
though UCF
most recent
just
opponent.
played them. Oh, one more thing on
Um,
that. I meant to say this, but Brandon Hellick posted a quote from BYU's head coach after that game where he said that, when they were coming to this league, UCF was not an environment they were worried about. And he said that was the best environment they've played in so far in this conference. So shout out to UCF's basketball fans. We never doubted you. You're great. We appreciate it.
yeah, shout out to all the UCF basketball fans listening to this right now. We're now moving on to UCF football, which is what some of you probably jumped to with the timestamp anyway.
Welcome into the Pegasus Podcast.
Yeah,
If you click the
welcome in.
timestamp.
Episode 188. Talking, not a lot's going on right now. I mean, we talk a lot about transfers in recent weeks, but there has been some shuffling of the coaching staff. The big news was on Wednesday UCF hired Ted Roof as its new defensive coordinator. Addison Williams will remain on as a co-defensive coordinator and now has an associate head coaching title or associate head coach title.
Yeah.
But that's significant
Yeah, don't get it
because
twisted. Addison Williams has been demoted and is no longer the DC. That's what's
yeah,
happened. Which for the Fire Addison crowd, congrats, guys. You were right. I argued with you for a month and a half,
and
basically, and you were
and
correct.
we'll see what you feel about this. I don't know.
Uh,
I haven't gotten too far into anything yet, but I don't know. I don't know.
I'm listen, I don't know. I was okay with it. When the news first broke, I didn't realize that I was thinking of it more in the concept of Addison would still be the DC and Ted Roof was like an older presence who's been around the game for years, who is here to like help him
David
through
Gibbs.
that process. Like what David Gibbs is doing or was doing. Who knows what's happened to him since he's also a co-DC. And according to his Twitter, as of 15 hours ago, was recruiting players. So I don't, maybe he just lost his co-DC title. I don't know. But yeah, I thought he would be that type, sort of just help with the game planning, help Addison get coached up to the level he need to be at. I didn't realize this was just straight up, no, Ted Roof is now the DC. Um, I have thoughts, and not a lot of them are good. So first off, I think that they are bailing on Addison as DC way too early. It was his first ever year as a defensive coordinator. Things were getting better by the end of the year. The defense was playing better as the year went on. And on top of that, I would challenge literally any defensive coordinator in the country to field a good defense with the linebacker room that they had. So I'm surprised that they bailed that early. Also, UCF is a Power 4, I guess, Power 4 job now. The offer to come in and run a Power 4 defense in the Big 12 is a very valuable job. And if UCF really was offering that, which they clearly were, I am so confused how they landed on a has-been who just got fired from being Oklahoma's DC when he wasn't even really the DC because Brent Venables ran the defense. And the only connection is that Gus used to work with him at Auburn. And it seems like Gus is just kind of in good old boy mode now where it's, oh, all these guys I worked with years ago who I like, let's bring them in. I don't know. I'm just not big on this hire.
That's why it feels like, in what you just said, is like it feels like if they had gone out and been, if they had, and I'm not saying they should have, but if they had fired Addison Williams altogether and had an open, a vacant defensive coordinator position, I think they get a better quality candidate than Ted Roof.
That's fair.
And I don't know. So I don't know if it limited the pool or if it really was, he's available. Gus is like, hey, I like that guy. He's my friend. We coached at Auburn together. Come be the DC here. I don't know. He just got fired. He's coached at a million stops, and everything I've read, I haven't really seen anything. Like I said, I haven't gotten too far into this, but everything I've seen so far, most people don't seem to think he's that good. Like I've seen Oklahoma fans like, good luck.
Oklahoma fans were thrilled. Like I was going through their 247 message boards and stuff from when he was initially fired. They were like, thank God. So that's never a good
Which is
thing.
funny because when you looked at, UCF's defense this past year was in some categories historically bad, but when you looked at some of the categories, Oklahoma like last year was decent. Like it wasn't that bad, and you don't know how much of that was him, how much of that was Brent Venables, who was the defense coordinator at Clemson before he took the head coaching job there, and how much of it is it's Oklahoma and they have the players.
Right.
Now you're going to be challenged here because like UCF has good players on defense, but they don't have that kind of depth yet, and they still have not figured out what's going on at linebacker. They brought in a bunch of transfers, and who knows? And now, how good of a DC are you? Are you going to be able to put this scheme together with these players after they've done all the portal stuff? You come in now. Are you going to be able to figure something out, or are you going to try to fit all these players into your scheme, and it's not going to work? And we're going to be looking for a new defensive coordinator this time next year. I don't know. I'm worried about it.
What you just said is my big issue with this whole thing too, is not just them changing DCs, but they obviously, and this is a thing a lot of schools do, it's shady, but UCF's far from the only school to do it, is you make these changes after you've gotten in all your recruits and portal players so you don't scare anybody off. And then once they're in, you're like, okay, by the way, we've changed coaches. But this is a brand new DC. The defense could look wildly different next year, and they just recruited all these players for Addison's defense. So I was joking with you. I'm like, Deshaun Pace is in to play star. Is star a thing next year? Like I don't know. I just don't. This could all work out fine, but I'm worried. I don't know. And the thing about Addison too is I'm thrilled he wasn't fired because he has been the key to a lot of these big recruits. Players love him. Yeah. He's a big reason they've elevated their recruiting on the defensive side of the ball. He's also turned out a lot of good players at the position that he coaches, so it's good to keep him in. He also, let's not forget, a year ago, he was a major rising star in the coaching world. It wasn't like UCF was like, let's be basic and promote a guy who was already on our staff. It was like, you give him the DC role or he's gone to another job because that many teams were interested in him. So the bailing on him after a year as DC, I don't know. I think it feels reactionary. And I told you that I was going to maybe say a thing on the podcast, but I wasn't sure if I was going to say it or not. And I think the time's come for me to just say it.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about how the goal was always to go 6-6 or 7-5 in this first season because that's what happens every single time a group of 5 team moves up to the power time. What'd you say?
Our goal.
Our goal, our personal goal was 6-6 or 7-5 because that's what happens every single time a G5 team moves to the P5. To those of you who say, why are you talking about TCU and the other one, Utah, because those were years ago, it's harder now than it was then because NIL is a thing and your players leaving to the portal is a thing. I'm sure UCF would have loved to move up with Tatum Bethune and Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste, but unfortunately they were on other rosters. So you can't build through multiple years, whatever. But we knew that was the goal. So this year was fine. It was what it was supposed to be. It was what it was expected to be. It was the best of the new 4. Gus making all these changes, because the strength coach is also gone, Stephen Leonard's reported the wide receivers coach is also gone, suggests that he actually thought they were supposed to be really good this year with the roster we know they had and with the jump that we know they made. That is the biggest alarm bells I've had on Malzahn in his entire tenure so far, if he actually believed that they were supposed to be like winning the Big 12 this year. And I don't know if that's what he thought, but when you have what was on paper the kind of season you were supposed to have and then start firing coaches, it implies you thought of something that wasn't possible as the goal. So that's worrying.
Yeah, and the two things I will say, I guess it's in favor of this. It's really bad that this is what's in favor of it, but I don't know how much worse it could be than last year. Like I don't know. Like,
it was fair.
It was bad last year. It really was. And I guess along those lines, if I'm sure a lot of you probably listened to the interview, but Jason Johnson went on Sons of UCF, was it last week? Talked about, or this week. It's been a long week. It's only Wednesday. And he went on and was talking just about, he's asked normal questions, and he said some things that raised red flags about the scheme that they were running on a week-to-week basis. And so I wonder if there was something to that where it's like, all right, they do need to figure out something as far as defensive coordinator. And maybe it was, and that would be, it's not a good position to be in either way, because maybe Gus thought, all right, yeah, maybe I do need to make a change. Like maybe Addison's not ready yet, but I don't want to completely fire him. Don't want to cost myself these recruits. Don't want to cost myself, this guy who's is still a young coach and could, improve and get better.
And who's been with Gus for a long time,
right?
Back to Auburn.
And I want to keep him on, but I need to bring in somebody who's going to be in this role. And then maybe that's how you got to that point where this is a limited pool of people that will come in and be a co-DC to kind of, take the reins, but also help this guy along. I don't know. Maybe that's how they got there, but I don't know. It's
maybe weird. That's how they got there. But then why did they also fire the strength coach and the wide receivers coach?
No, that's also strange. I don't know.
Wide receivers coach, which again, that one, I guess that hasn't been officially announced or anything. It was Stephen Leonard who reported that. And Grant Hurd's Twitter account he's the wide receivers coach, or has not been active since before Christmas. That I don't know anything about the background there, but it is kind of weird that UCF puts a wide receiver on the all Big 12 first team and then fires the positions coach. But whatever. At this point, I don't know. I don't know. These just feel, and if you want to spin it in a positive way, the truth is in college football, you need to be absolutely cutthroat to succeed. And that means not resting. That means not sitting on your laurels or saying, well, things are going fine. It's always looking to improve if you can. So if they're just being cutthroat, then fine. I'm not saying this won't work. I'm just saying that I question the logic that led to this decision is, I guess, where I'm at right now.
Yeah. When you're being cutthroat and then you're just like, let me just bring on this guy who just got fired from his position in the same conference.
That's the thing. If you're going to be cutthroat, be cutthroat. I don't hate, if you really are that out on Addison after one season, fine. But then to do all that and put him through what's pretty embarrassing publicly of demoting him after a single season as DC when he was considered a very up and coming coach. And then your fix is a 62-year-old guy who's bounced around to a billion different schools, was terrible when he was a head coach and was just fired 2 weeks ago. I don't know.
Was it really 2 weeks ago?
Yes.
I guess it would have been, the end of the season. Wow.
So I don't know. I don't know what to think about this. Hopefully we're sitting here a year from now and saying, who knew that 62-year-old Ted Roof was a defensive genius?
Was what they really needed.
But what's going to bother me, and again, I'm not saying there weren't issues with Addison. I understand there were. I'm not sitting here and saying things were perfect. They weren't. He was a first-time DC. I believe that, everyone's bad at something they do for the first time. Over time, you can improve and get better. I thought this season would have been
listen to our first podcast.
Just listen to it. It's terrible. Go listen to it right now. It's awful.
Actually, please don't.
Yeah, actually, it was a really bad podcast. It wasn't that bad. Okay, it was pretty bad.
I don't remember it, but
it was just very stale because we were new to the idea of podcasting. Yeah. So it was just like, hi, I am Christian Simmons, and I'm here to talk about UCF. Like,
That's
this is
back
not
when we
great.
did. That's when I did the news from every sport, talking about track and field on this podcast.
I think the biggest argument we've ever had in the history of this podcast was I begged you for months. I was like, "Can we stop doing that?" Because it was like we would cover everything, and I remember I'll never forget because I was very like lightly broaching to you one time. I'm like, "Do we need to do the news?" And you said to me, it was actually such a nice sentiment, but I'm cutthroat like Gus Malzahn. You were like, you said if one person finds something interesting in that news section, then it's worth it to me. And that's so nice. But unfortunately, you've now been demoted to associate head coach and we've gotten rid of the news. So here we are.
Yeah.
But I don't even remember where I was going. I think I just maybe Ted Roof works
Does
out,
that
but I think this is
mean
a weird move.
does that mean like the football news, game of the week, and tweet of the week are our Ted Roof, the podcast? I don't know.
I
I don't know
guess.
if that works.
Should we name it
Um,
after him? The Ted
no,
Roof news?
no, we
I kind of
shouldn't.
want to. I think we should.
I was gonna make a joke and I never really formulated it in my head before the podcast. So I was gonna here's what I was you can help me workshop this. Remember when UCF Stadium was supposed to be like roofclaim.com? Now they've got
Yes.
their roof. It's Ted Roof.
Oh
Something
my
along those
God. That would
lines.
have
They
actually been
finally
I'm not even gonna lie, that would have been a great lead in if you'd had that ready.
they
Yeah.
finally got a roof and it's Ted. I don't know. I don't know
Maybe
where to
we're
go
wrong a
from
year
here.
from now. Maybe it went great. I'm not saying that it's not going to.
I listen,
I'm hoping we look back on this podcast and they're like, what a bunch of idiots. Why were we worried about this? But I have concerns.
and I have never shied away from the fact that I'm an idiot. So I don't want to hear it from anyone if this works out really well. It's like you guys were down on this. I'll tell you right now, last year when they hired Darren Hinshaw, I was like, I'm not sure about this. And I'm not saying it was a like resounding success, like, oh my gosh, he's the best offensive coordinator ever. But I feel better at this time about him than I did last year. So there's
Yeah.
always room for us to be proven wrong. And I've even said, like, I've made it clear that I have not done my research into what kind of defense he runs, like what his defense looks like, all this stuff. But just early reactions or early thoughts are, I'm not so sure.
And I will say, I hope that we are not, and I don't believe we are, but I hope we're not falling into a very common trap in college athletics, which fans and media and even football programs do, which is flash. Is we perceive candidates with that make a bigger splash as being better. I think the big example of that was there were all the rumors flying around, which were sort of true, that Scott Frost had interest in the UCF offensive coordinator job. And then it goes to Darren Hinshaw. Scott Frost is a big splash candidate. Darren Hinshaw's not. And I think Scott Frost would have probably been a disaster if he'd come in as OC. And not because of anything he would do as OC, just more because Gus Malzahn and
The
Scott Frost
power
coexisting
dynamic.
at UCF would have been, if every single game UCF won, the fan base would have said that's because of Frost being a great OC. And every time they lose, it would have been get Gus out of here, Frost. It would have been bad. So that's the thing. But and you look at what's going on in college football right now, like Alabama just hired Kalen DeBoer as their head coach, who was an out of nowhere hire all the way back at Fresno State. He had been D3 his whole career, I believe, or D2, one of those levels. And I'm not saying that because Ted Roof isn't a splashy hire that he's bad. It's more just that he hasn't had recent success as a coordinator. He's been around a long time, and so I'm not expecting any like major innovations there, or anything like that. And I just feel like bailing on Addison this early was a weird decision. But at least they're keeping around for recruiting, which, like I said, they have to. He's been a huge key to their recruiting defense.
Yeah. I guess we can move on from there, right?
Oh,
Move
let
on
me
to the
say one
football
more
news.
thing. UCF fired their strength coach, Chris Dawson, and they replaced him with Anthony Kinsey, who's another
Yeah.
former Gus guy. So
Yeah.
I don't
We
really
referenced that a few minutes ago, and I was just going to move it to the news section, but we're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
The Ted Roof news section.
the roofclaim.com news section, not sponsored by
I
the
don't
way.
think we can do that.
Can they? Based on what? We just gave them free pub. We're not supposed to do that.
Can you? I don't know. Can you name part of your show after a sponsor that's not sponsoring it and has no idea you're doing it?
Why not?
Because if so, it's Olive Garden tweet of the week from now on.
Why? It's because why not? I don't think.
I guess not. Okay.
What would
Yeah,
what
sure.
would the problem be there? I'm sure
I don't know.
now someone's going to be like, actually,
Someone's gonna be like, yeah, that's copyright, but whatever. We're fine.
So who cares? So yeah, the football news. Javon Baker accepted an invite to the Senior Bowl, so you heard it here first. Both Javon Baker and I will be in Mobile, Alabama.
How excited are you to interview him?
I don't. I'm curious to see how what kind of interview he is. I know we know a lot of people who. Well, I don't know, because I guess he wouldn't have been one-on-one interviewed anywhere, would he?
I don't know if he's
UCF doesn't let that happen. I don't think.
Yeah,
So,
UCF doesn't let one-on-ones happen very often, so I don't think that's ever happened.
I don't know. It'll be interesting because I mean I'm sure either be wearing like a UCF hat or make a reference to something, in fact, like, hey, I went to UCF.
But have you
I don't know if he's going to care.
how unique of a position you are in because you're the only UCF affiliated person who's going to talk to him, and you can ask him anything about UCF. And this man in a one-on-one setting might just say stuff.
So this is what I was wondering is because he's earned that reputation,
A little bit.
but at like and it was different, from player to player last year, but at these kind of things, these guys don't really know who you are. And so because they're in a setting where they're trying to like
Get
establish
drafted.
themselves for the NFL draft, they're kind of like either very basic or just like very, straight and to the point, don't say anything. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm not gonna try to make him say anything. I'm not even
No,
sure if
I'm not
I'll
saying try to bait
like,
Jay. I'm just saying
no,
ask him
I'm
basic
not even
questions.
sure if I'll find him because it's the way the interview portion is set up is very
Can you ask him one question from me?
Maybe.
And it's a question I never would ask myself, so that's why I'm putting it on you. Ask him if he feels that UCF would have had a better 2023 football season if Mikey Keene had been the quarterback.
I don't know if I mean,
no
we'll
one can
see.
stop you. This is outside UCF's realm. That SID, this is separate from UCF. You can ask him whatever you want.
He's not a UCF player anymore. I was gonna ask him about the what did he do? Did he blow a kiss at how am I forgetting that?
He blew a kiss at Brent Venables.
Yeah, I was
when
gonna
he
ask
was
him about
running
that.
for the touchdown.
Yeah, I kind of want to ask him about that because
ask him if he feels like the blowing the kiss would have gone off better if he had just caught a pass from Mikey instead of John Rice Plumlee.
Good. Speaking of John Rice Plumlee, he accepted an invite to the East West Shrine Bowl, which I've noticed this past week that bowl has just bounced around everywhere. Back when I was in high school, and for a long time, it was at Tropicana Field in St. Pete. I covered it a couple of times when I was in high school. And then it moved out to I think it was in the Raiders Stadium out in Vegas for maybe like a year or two. Now it's in Frisco, Texas.
Nice.
So I don't know what's happened there. But John Rice Plumlee will be there. He'll be in Frisco, Texas. I'm not even sure when that game is. It'll be within the next couple of weeks. Former Ole Miss defensive back Ladarius Tennyson committed to UCF last week.
Did that happen since the last
that.
podcast?
Yeah.
Oh man,
we were wondering if it was going to happen. I think before last podcast, and then it didn't, or the night of the podcast.
So really quickly, because we're running along here a little bit. He started Ole Miss as a safety 2 years ago. He came from Auburn originally and was really good. Then this year he wasn't a full-time starter because they transitioned him into this more like hybrid linebacker role. He was one of those guys that you could just kind of plug in all over the field and he'd make plays. Big deal they got him. He was not a guy that Ole Miss wanted to leave. They're having some issues where they lost a couple guys they weren't expecting to, and it's a big deal. UCF got him, and I love all these graphics. We've gotten Deshaun Pace was a safety when we thought he was going to be a linebacker. Some guys are linebacker. Ladarius Tennyson's graphic was just DB. So yeah. I think the plan for Tennyson is they're just going to kind of put him wherever they need to put him, and he can make plays and do all kinds of crazy stuff. He's a big addition. I can't wait to see how Ted Roof uses him next year.
That's a weird sentence.
Yep.
But no, I think we could be sitting here, and we've done this in the past, fallen into this trap in the past, but I think we could be sitting here at the end of the season and talking about him as being one of the higher impact transfers they got.
I think so.
I
think so. Because he's going to put up the stats just for the way that he can be used, I feel like. So we will see.
The last piece of news, Jerry and Susan Roth made a program-changing gift. That's how Terry Mohajer described it towards a football campus. What?
We got
what?
You see it, that linebacker I told you about. As we're recording, Matt Zenitz from 247 is reporting that transfer linebacker Ethan Barr is transferring to UCF. He's from Vanderbilt originally, and had transferred to Washington because UCF missed out on him. But now Washington's in shambles since their coach left. So UCF just got another linebacker, and a really good one. So
a really good one. And you heard it here first as how Christian introduced this as "damn it." What's the first thing he said?
I said to you before the podcast, like, I'm sick of there being booms during the podcast. It had never happened before this year. Now it's happening nonstop, and I knew it was going to happen.
Well, we haven't got an official boom yet, but
I'm tweeting about it anyway. Hold on.
Now. All right. You can tweet about it. Actually, no, you can't tweet. Oh, yeah, you can. I'll talk about game of the week real quick. Oh, but the program changing gift. If it's so program changing, build the lazy river. That's all I'll say. Game of the week. UCF men's basketball, who we talked about at the top of the podcast for quite a while. We're not sure how this game, as we're speaking, not sure how Wednesday night's game against Texas will go, but they play on Saturday at 2:00 at number 2 Houston. Houston's 14-2, 1-2 in the Big 12. UCF goes into the Texas game 10-5, 1-2 in the Big 12. So we'll see how that one works out. As Christian mentioned earlier, it was I don't remember what year it was, but UCF has beaten Houston recently. When they weren't supposed to. So and UCF just beat Kansas. Was it 2 years ago? UCF just beat Kansas last week. And I know that was at home, but I think we're learning that it wasn't just a UCF thing. I think we're learning that in college basketball, and more specifically in the Big 12, anything just seems to be happening. So it's a random night. It's quite the league, and I've had fun the last few weeks just kind of watching random games. Like I've got a schedule over here, just like, all right, which games are on tonight, and it's a random. I don't know. Let's look at one. Baylor and Texas is on Saturday. Like I don't know. I might find myself watching that
I
because it's
watched
been fun. Like that
Cincinnati.
league is. Oh, TCU, yeah,
Cincinnati, it was a really freaking good game, and it was just one
yeah,
I picked up out of nowhere. And yeah, this is the most I ever paid attention to college basketball. Also, Jameer Nelson Jr. on TCU messed with me. Did not
yeah,
like hearing that.
yeah. That's a weird scenario. But all right, tweet of the week.
Tweet of the week. Tweet of the week is going to a tweet that has not been tweeted yet. It is a tweet of the future. It's actually multiple tweets of the future. And tweet of the week is going to go to everybody who, after UCF loses to Texas and Houston, goes back to fire Dawkins like the last week didn't happen. So I'm proactively giving you all tweet of the week for when you go back to being angry and wanting everyone gone. So congrats on
Cool.
pre-earning tweet of the week.
I like it. That's the cool thing is if even one of you tweets that, you singularly won tweet of the week. But well, actually, no, yeah, we just probably back ourselves into a corner here. If anyone happens to listen to this before that game ends, which some of you might, I don't know, you're gonna tweet that just so you can say I earned tweet of the week. If you're one of those people, bad person.
I can
You
think of
didn't get
three
it.
different people who I know are likely to do that. And I'm not acknowledging any of you when you do it. I swear to God, I'm not
Yep.
doing it.
Bad person. You
Also, I just have
you
to
did
say,
not
quick
earn tweet of
shout
the week.
out to Stephen Leonard. He's the reason I saw the Ethan Barr news because I did not see Matt Zenit's original tweet. I saw his quote tweet of it that he put the eyeball emojis on. So there we
All
go.
right.
Since we still have not gone to boom.
Shout out Steven. All right, that'll be it for this podcast. Talked a lot about men's basketball, got into the football coaching stuff, and even had a boom before we got a boom toward the end of the podcast
Free
there.
boom.
But we will be back next week with episode 189. Until then, you can find us on Twitter at Bailey J Adams 22, at by CA Simmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. Thank you guys so much for being with us, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye, everybody.